We are going to get started with events in the Middle East and with Keir Starmer, and there's probably a health warning required for this. If anybody is feeling in any way queasy, it's about to get worse. Let's have a listen.
Good evening. In the last few hours, the Iranian regime has launched over 200 ballistic missiles at civilian targets in Israel. It's too soon to assess the impact fully, but I utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis, to escalate this incredibly dangerous situation and push the region ever closer to the brink.
So that was Starmer's comments. Everybody can make their own judgment about those, but let's have a look at John Healey then, our Secretary of State for War. And this is what he had to say. I completely condemn Iran's attack on Israel. British forces have this evening played their part in attempts to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. Now, this follows on from the Iranian attack in April, when British jets were claimed to have shot down a number of drones. These were, the UK military, the UK Air Force, the RAF, shooting down these drones as part of what they were calling Operation Shader. And this is actually shooting them down in Syrian airspace, as it were. But Healey went on to say this. He said, the UK stands fully behind Israel's right to defend its country and its people against threats. So this is already being, unsurprisingly, perhaps framed as a matter of defence. But Vanessa, what's been the latest?
Well, I mean, the extraordinary thing, I'll come on to the Iranian attack, but actually they only targeted military bases and installations. And as far as I know, to date, there were no civilians harmed, which of course is the exact opposite of any Israeli operation that has no regard whatsoever for civilian life. So this is our dear, or your dear, David Lammy. So initially, the first thing I heard about it was an IOF spokesperson saying that the US has informed Israel that Iran is intending to launch missiles. So this was last night, I think around 5 or 6 o'clock. UK foreign minister has asked its Iranian counterparts for Iran to exercise restraint. And of course, that's the messaging that we've continuously been getting from the UK, the EU and the US. Then the next thing that I saw basically was this map of the alert sirens in the occupied territories of Palestine. And you can see that the map turned red before our eyes. So we all assumed at that point, well, something was incoming. The next thing that I personally saw were the missiles passing overhead in the skies of Syria. So at that point, we definitely knew, that the attack had begun. So I'm going to first of all just look at the responses today or yesterday. This was in Politico. Israel vows consequences for Iran after the missile barrage. Netanyahu said Iran made a big mistake in attacking Israel and will pay for it. Then let's have another quick look at the article itself. So again, Iran will face the consequences. The promise of retaliation from Israel raises the danger of a heightened cycle of violence. And then speaking at a televised address several hours after the attack, Netanyahu said Iran has made a big mistake. Those who attack us, we attack them. Of course, no mention of the fact that Israel has been pounding Lebanon and carried out the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh back in July in Tehran. And of course, the assassination of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Syed Hassan Nasrallah, a few days ago. This was in the US Naval Institute news. US warships fire a dozen interceptors against Iranian missile attack, and then have a look again at the messaging within the text of the article. We condemn these reckless attacks by Iran, and we call on Iran to halt any further attacks, including from its proxy forces. So we can see where the framing is heading on both sides of the Atlantic here. I just wanted to compare this to these claims that Israel has a right to self-defense, that the US, the UK, and the EU will stand behind whatever decision that Israel makes. But let's have a look at a video of Matthew Miller, the US State spokesman, when he's challenged about the murder of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah by 85 2,000-pound bombs that were dropped in a densely populated civilian area in southern Beirut. Let's play that.
What we have definitely not seen is restraint. And you talked about a ceasefire involving two sides, but on this we have seen a very sharp escalation by the Israelis. So as your call for restraint has failed.
So we continue to call for a diplomatic resolution, but at the same time, as I said, Hezbollah has continued to launch rockets that have kept Israeli civilians from returning to their home, and Israel absolutely, along with every country in the world, has a right to defend itself from terrorism. It also has a right to go after legitimate terrorist targets like Hassan Nasrallah, and we support them taking those steps, just as we have brought terrorists who targeted American citizens to justice over time. But that said, we long-term want to see a diplomatic resolution. That's what we're continuing to pursue.
I'll let you draw your own conclusions from that. These were two Zionist-aligned, and Zionist, actually, commentators on X last night. Barak Ravid, who's, I think, foreign correspondent for Axios, a US official, told me the Iranian attack was defeated by the US and Israel and was ineffective. It's a great success. Dr. Eli David, who actually deleted the post, claimed that one of the videos that was showing the missile strikes in central Palestine or the occupied territories claimed that the video was reversed and that these are Israel's interceptor missiles being launched. That, as you can see, was contested even by the community notes. There are claims that among the various targets that were hit, I'll come on to that. Sorry, I've missed out the video. If we can now just play, bearing in mind that the West and Israel are claiming that 97% of those missiles were intercepted, I'll leave you again to draw your own conclusions. Iran is saying 80% hit their targets. We can aim for, let's say, something in between. But if you watch this compilation of a number of the videos that were being put out, mostly filmed by Palestinians, I have to say, you can draw your own conclusions as to how many actually hit their targets.
المطار دخل مطارنا مطارنا دخل يا ولاد طال مطارنا دخل طال المطار ده ينعم تحرك 200 المطار يا رب الله يا
Okay, guys, we got to get off the roof. These are coming down right next to us here. They're coming down. One just about. We got to go inside.
So as I say, you can draw your own conclusions from that, but a huge number do appear to have hit target, and I'll come on to what the targets were shortly. There are claims on social media and various media reports from the region that the attacks reportedly destroyed a number of F-35 stealth fighter jets in Nevatim Air Base, which was one of the bases hit, and F-15s in another base, could be Hatzarim. These reports are not confirmed yet, but those two bases definitely took a series of hits. there are also reports that the gas fields or gas platforms off the coast of the occupied territories were hit. And there was a video this morning of them burning, but I wasn't able to verify the video before I came on. But also just confirmation here in the next video from CNN of the fact that missiles did hit in the center of Tel Aviv, actually targeting the Mossad headquarters there. So let's just have a look at this.
The U.S. intel view that among the targets were Israeli airfields, but also, and this is crucial, the headquarters of Mossad, the International Intelligence Service of Israel, which is inside Tel Aviv. It's in the northern part of Tel Aviv, but it's in the city. It's in a densely populated area. And of course, the concern is if you're firing, even though Iran might consider that a military target, it is in a densely populated city with civilians around it.
So, of course, that does mean that I've pointed out on many occasions that Israel installs its military and intelligence headquarters in the center of a civilian area in Tel Aviv. But as I've said, Iran did not target civilians, and to date, there has not been any civilians reported killed in the occupied territories. Now, these are images of the control and command headquarters in Iran. The chief of staff of Iran's armed forces, who's the guy on the left, among our targets were Israel's three main air bases, Mossad's terror headquarters, radar sites, and gathering sites of armored vehicles around the Gaza Strip, responsible for the genocide in Gaza. Only military sites were targeted. And then this is from Al Akhbar English, which you can follow on Telegram. General Staff of Iranian Armed Forces. Iran does not abandon its legitimate right to self-defense in the face of any aggression, and will make any vile aggressor, regardless of their level, regret their actions. If the aggressor entity, Israel, retaliates, it should expect widespread and comprehensive destruction of its infrastructure in the occupied Palestinian territories in the event of direct intervention by the countries supporting the entity, which of course is the UK and the US, in its aggression against Iran. Their centers and interests across the region will be simultaneously targeted by a powerful attack from the Iranian armed forces. So here we have actually Iran directly challenging NATO member states in the region. Quite extraordinary events. And there was a later video which showed one of the impacts next to the Mossad headquarters, describing it as a crater 30 foot by 50 foot deep. The other information that I've received is that Iran was effectively using old stocks of ballistic missiles. There are reports of hypersonic that I think is entirely untrue. But what they were basically using is fairly old technology, but they still managed to penetrate the Israeli air defense, so the Iron Dome, the David Sling, the Arrow 1 and 2, and the US attempts to intercept during the attack. So I think this has exposed the vulnerability of Israel to an attack of this kind.
Thank you, Vanessa. I mean, just listening to that the statement from the General Staff of Iranian Armed Forces, everybody's claiming a legitimate right to self-defense, and it becomes perpetuating, doesn't it, under those circumstances? Just listening to Tom Tugendhat, who's of course in the running for the Tory party leadership this morning, talking about this, and he's talking about it in terms of language of needing an international coalition to deal with Iran, and we're heading right back to the beginning of the 21st century here, 2001 again, and pushing this narrative of regime change once again. Now, Iran, as we know, was on the target list for the United States and the UK for many, many years now, a few decades. I just would like to get your comment on this, because countries like Iran, Russia as well to some degree, are sort of on a hiding to nothing here, because if they exercise their right to self-defense, it will always be presented as being an aggressive act. And when in fact, if we look over the last lot of decades, we have mainly been the aggressors?
Yeah, I mean, I did actually talk about this about an hour before the attack with Said Mohammed Marandi and Kivok al-Masyan. And you know, the fact is that Hezbollah and Iran have been trying to actually de-escalate, to restrict the backwards and forwards of attacks. But it reaches a point where when you're trying to deal from a basis of international law and integrity and morality, but the enemy isn't. The enemy is basically violating every single international law and Geneva Convention and is showing absolutely nothing but inhumanity towards civilians. At some point, you have to take a stand and say, well, okay, it's going to happen anyway, just as it did in Ukraine. We have to take a preemptive action. And that, I believe, is exactly what Iran has decided to do.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Let's go back to the Middle East. And Vanessa, a bit of context maybe for what's been happening.
Yeah, I think just for people to fully understand the elements that led to Iran's retaliation against Israel last night. So first of all, of course, we had the assassination of Saeed Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, in the center of the south of Beirut in a civilian area. 85 2,000-pound bombs were dropped in order to destroy the underground sort of tunnels and offices where he was, alongside, of course, an Iranian commander also. But on the 29th of September, Israel attacked 4 countries in 24 hours. So let's just have a quick look at a video summarizing that. And of course, all of these attacks killed civilians, including in Damascus when 3 people were killed, including a colleague, a journalist, and 9 were injured. And of course, not only these attacks, Israel has been attacking Syria, trying to destroy air defense radar and systems to clear a pathway for future air aggression against Syria, clearly. Then US officials quietly backed Israel's military push against Hezbollah, which included the assassination of the Secretary General. Remembering, Hezbollah is a political entity. It's a political party in Lebanon, and it's part of the interim government. Senior White House figures privately told Israel that the US would support its decision to ramp up the military pressure against Hezbollah, even as the Biden administration publicly urged the Israeli government in recent weeks to curtail its strikes, according to American and Israeli officials. As I've mentioned, as it also mentions, whenever you have American officials in Lebanon or anywhere in the region, it is generally followed by an escalation. And then if we look at the actual damage from the Israeli attacks in Lebanon, the red dots are obviously the areas that Israel is targeting. And as you can see, it's not only contained to the south, it's along the whole border areas. Of course, we believe the attempt will be to close the borders between Lebanon and Syria, to isolate Lebanon and isolate Syria. 1,208 dead. I think that is now much higher. Unfortunately, we're now at around 2,000. 104 children, 194 women, 1 million displaced people, many of whom have come into Syria and are being resettled in various governorates here, and also being provided with medical care and so on in the already overtaxed Syrian hospitals. And then let's have a look at the speech that Netanyahu gave at the UN regarding the curse and the blessing maps. Let's just have a look at this, quite extraordinary.
It's a map of a curse. It's a map of an arc of terror that Iran has created and imposed from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Iran's malignant arc has shut down international waterways. It cuts off trade. It destroys millions, destroys nations from within, and inflicts misery on millions. It's a map of a blessing. It shows Israel and its Arab partners forming a land bridge connecting Asia and Europe between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea.
Of course, I'll remind people of Kennedy's statement, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., when he basically pointed out Israel's role for the United States in this region. And of course, part of that is to prevent the rise of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, of Russia, of Iran. And of course, that means including the blessing, which is the Middle East Economic Corridor, which goes from India through the Gulf states, Israel, to Europe. Then this image has been circulating of when Netanyahu gave the approval for the assassination of Nasrallah. Now, some have reported it was in his hotel room. Some have said it was at the UNGA. It doesn't matter. It was when he was at the UN. So that says something about the role of the UN in all of this also. And then let's go on to what was actually used, remembering, of course, the claim that Iran put civilian lives in danger when it attacked the occupied territories of Palestine last night. What are the bunker buster bombs? This is from Press TV, also known as ground penetration munitions. Each bomb weighs between 900 and 1,800 kilograms, with the ability to penetrate up to 30 meters of earth or 6 meters of concrete. Upon detonation, bunker busters generate powerful shockwaves that can collapse heavily fortified structures like civilian apartments. And then if we have a look at the next image, we can actually see the extent to which these bombs did penetrate the foundations of the multiple residential blocks that were around the area where they killed Nasrallah. And on the right is an image of the actual explosion. And then finally, Mike, you referred to whether or not Iran feels under threat. And that might be one of the reasons, alongside all of the other elements that of course, have led to this retaliation, including the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's leader in Tehran in July. But let's just have a listen to Netanyahu speaking again. Remember when he spoke to the Lebanese people? Now he's speaking to the Iranian people.
I speak a lot about the leaders of Iran. Yet at this pivotal moment, I want to address you, the people of Iran. I want to do so directly, without filters, without middlemen. Every day, you see a regime that subjugates you make fiery speeches about defending Lebanon, defending Gaza. Yet every day, that regime plunges our region deeper into darkness and deeper into war. Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Mohammed Deif. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. The vast majority of Iranians know their regime doesn't care a whit about them. If it did care, if it cared about you, it would stop wasting billions of dollars on futile wars across the Middle East. It would start improving your lives. Imagine if all the vast money the regime wasted on nuclear weapons and foreign wars were invested in your children's education and improving your health care, in building your nation's infrastructure, water, sewage, all the other things that you need. Imagine that.
Extraordinary projection there. I think you could apply that to the UK, the US, the EU, and Israel.
Yes, indeed. Thank you